This week, we heard from Mr. and Mrs. Contact, Vivin Hegde from Zacua Ventures and Antonia Soler from Hilti about global construction technologies. I was thrilled to have the opportunity to speak to Vivin and Antonia on the podcast. Vivin talked us through the evolution of founding a tech business to an exit, what a founder really needs to think about from seed to Series C to actually get them to that point. Antonia supported all of this, but also shared 3 key questions a founder needs to consider to successfully grow a business. And one thing is clear, from seed to Series C, there's a huge amount of capital out there in construction technology. But founders really need to ensure that they are super passionate about their product and not just thinking about the end goal, an exit. Their customers and investors will see through it. Vivin and Antonia gave some great examples of context out there, with special shout outs to EcoWorks, Water, Measurable, Urban Machine, Carbon Title, Fieldwire, Modulus, Cloud Apartments, and KitSwitch. So obviously an array of construction technologies for you to check out before, but tune into the episode to hear a lot more about all things technology and construction when it comes down to the built environment. So enjoy, and thanks for tuning in.
This is the Propcast, and I'm Louisa Dickins. Before we introduce our guest, here's a quick word from our sponsor.
Are you looking for a space for women who make lasers and robots that break glass ceilings? I'm Antonia Soler, co-founder of Women in Construction Tech. If you're a founder, investor, or adopter who believes in advancing women in our industry, please join us at womeninconstructiontech.com.
Hello to everyone listening in this morning or evening, depending where you are. And today's a very special episode. So I have 2 very dear friends from the industry on the show who have played a huge part. And I was just telling them this actually, very mushy, in my understanding of innovation within construction. So I can't wait for everyone listening in to absorb all the knowledge that they've shared with me. And so let's welcome Vivin Hegde, who is a general partner at Zacua Ventures, and Antonia Soler, who is the technology office director at Hilti. Welcome, guys.
Thanks, Lou, for having me.
Thanks, Louise. I'm very happy to join you here today.
Now they're joining us from San Francisco, and we're recording this just before Christmas. And Antonia is finally about to get on a flight and go back to Europe to enjoy Christmas with her family. So this is going to be about a 30-minute podcast, and we're going to cover an awful lot. So most people listening in to this from the US construction technology social circuit will probably know both of them, our guests, not only for their huge contribution in terms of thought leadership, maybe introductions they consistently do, or it could be post-conference drinks parties where they both like to take to the dance floor. I don't know. But for those who don't know them, obviously I mentioned Vivin is a general partner at Zacua Ventures, which is an early-stage global venture capital firm focused on improving productivity and sustainability within the built environment. And lovely Antonia works with Hilti's corporate venture team to identify the technologies that will shape the future of the construction industry. We'll obviously start off with summarising their careers to date, how they first met each other. They both worked at Hilti for some time. They're going to be showing us a little bit more about investment we're looking to see in 2023, challenges that face the construction industry globally, and where some innovation is needed. Now, as they have both worked in the space for some time, they can share a few tips with us about maybe how you want to grow your client list, how you're looking to scale, maybe a few exit tips. I don't know. But a big thing, which obviously I'm passionate about, Vivian's passionate about, and especially Antonia, is we are all strong advocates of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Antonia's to be sharing with us, do we call it an association, a group? She co-founded Women in Construction, which is a tech community. And so she's sharing a bit more about what we can do to obviously get more women to space, really sort of be an ambassador for it, and hopefully generate a few more sort of career pathways as well, and just give more opportunities. And then obviously, like we've done the last few podcasts, we're going to finish off with our guests that are sharing about if there are any products out there in the market which can make our built environment more sustainable. Construction is obviously a huge contributor to carbon dioxide. So let's see what we can do to reduce it. So enough from me. Let's bring in the guests. So Antonia, talk us through a bit more about your sort of journey, because I know when we met, Hilti's worked in sort of like as account management, product, obviously more in the investment. And share with us how you met lovely Vivin too.
Yes,
So Vivin and I first met, 8 or 9 years ago when we were both working at the Hilti global headquarters in Liechtenstein. And I'm thrilled that our paths have kept crossing ever since. So my journey to contact started when I was getting my master's in industrial engineering back home in Barcelona. I did a university program called Unitech, which included an internship at Hilti. I really enjoy the company culture and the opportunities for professional growth. And jumping forward 10 years, I've worked for Hilti in 3 different cities across 2 countries, and I held roles in supply management, product management, and sales management before starting my current job with the corporate venture team. These experiences gave me a good view into so many aspects of the construction industry. But what has always excited me most is the content innovation that has accelerated tremendously during my career. Living in the San Francisco Bay Area means having a front row seat to the business of innovation, venture capital, startups, and so on. So contact always felt like a perfect fit for me since it combines my engineering education, construction industry experience, and my love of innovation.
Thank you for that, Antonia. Now we'll be sharing a bit more about the Women in Construction group you've obviously created. Vivin, what about you? Obviously, I think it's a year ago you started Zacua, which is backed by some pretty heavy hitters, which is awesome. But you didn't just, what's the backstory to Zacua as well? What got you there?
So it hasn't been a linear path. So it's been a very windy path, and it's been a culmination of a lot of things I've done in my life. So I grew up being a mechanical engineer. So back in school, I used to build these climbing robots, take it to robotic competitions. So I was more of a roboticist when I was growing up. But being a mechanical engineer, you can get into a few different verticals. I got the opportunity to join India's largest construction firm, but I decided I didn't really want to uh, work back then. I wanted to study a little bit more. So I decided to pursue my other passion, which is numbers. So did my MBA in finance economics. I started off at Deutsche Bank. I was on the prop desk. So I was actually trading climate credits back in 2005, 2006, before it was even a concept which was popularized. But the desk only spoke in Greek. It was gammas and betas and alphas and stuff like that, which was stimulating intellectually, but I needed more people contact. So I ended up joining McKinsey. So McKinsey joined the industrial practice. I was there for about 7 years. Did a lot of fascinating projects. I was in Africa for a year, transforming copper mine. I was in Indonesia, building out automotive network. I moved to Fargo in winter, which is not a place you should
No.
visit in winter because it goes to -40. But it was a lot of fun. It was over 6 7 years. Learned building businesses, learned transforming businesses, and everything in the industrial space, right? And this is where Hilti was starting to think about how do we move into new areas. They have a team of corporate development where they hire ex-project managers from McKinsey, BCG, Bain. And this team basically looks at business expansion into new areas. It looks at moving to new markets, adjacencies, and that's how I got into Hilti, right? So and Hilti building being an industrial company, being a global conglomerate, was looking at someone with my background who understand industrials, who has a global mindset, and who's also analytical. So that's how got there. Spent a couple of years in that department, which is where I actually met Antonia for the first time as well. And we've known each other ever since. And that was really, really interesting. All right. This was a good transition from a strategy consultant to an industrial firm. But I also wanted to understand the business in and out. So I wanted sales experience. So after my strategy stint, I actually started as a frontline sales guy. So I was visiting job sites 10 times every day, selling the Red Hilti tools on job sites, just to understand the customers, to understand the product, and then went on to lead the sales team on the West Coast, in the Bay Area, actually. And at this point in time, this Hilti started to think about the Open Innovation Office. So we started to think about how we move into the digital world, and the customer demands were changing. And traditionally, Hilti had always been thinking about internal innovation, right? And so me and Greg, another colleague who's at Building Ventures, also a guy you should talk to.
Greg Wallace actually is he's on a previous episode, I think, It's the episode before this. So shout out to Greg Wallace as well.
He's awesome, and there are 2-3 years when Greg and I spent more time with each other than we spent with our wives when we setting this innovation team up, right? But the mandate was about building the connection, understanding the ecosystem, building the connection, building the processes, and so on and so forth. And pretty much when we're setting this up, I asked a board member what he expects of us. He's like, "You have 2 years. You have a blank sheet. Make it work." And if it works, that's great. This grows and becomes much larger. If it doesn't work, we'll find you something else to do. So everything from writing our own role descriptions to think about what to do, what targets to set, everything was new. We didn't have a rule book. So it was a lot of fun and it was exciting. And those are like 2 or 3 of the best years I had in Hilti, right? In terms of doing everything. And Antonia's supercharging it, and she's doing a lot of good work back on the back of it. And this is where the seeds of Zacua were also sown, right? We had built a network. We'd seen how hard corporate innovation is for a lot of corporates. And we had also invested in funds. Invested in funds. We've done also investments in startups. But it's very difficult. So if you look at how corporates go about innovation, they typically don't have the network. They don't understand how to work with startups. And it's a painful journey. And everybody is going through that journey. And today, there are not enough platforms which are enabling them to do that. So typically, what corporates do is they go and invest in funds. But in general, a fund is incentivized financially. Corporates are incentivized strategically. So there's a slight misalignment of incentives that happens between a fund and a corporate. And they deviate over a period of time, especially as funds start to get larger and larger, right? Which is unfortunate in construction, because in construction, startups get a lot of value from corporates. They can be pilots, they can give access to technologies, they can give access to workflows, and so on and so forth. But to have a truly good platform, this has to be global because trends are global. So if you look at sustainability, Europe is much more advanced. Robotics, Korea, Japan, a few other markets more advanced. Construction software, US is advanced. So having global presence, being early, because this is where startups need the most help. This is where corporates can engage so that they can have time to de-risk their involvement. They can take 6-12 months to understand them and so on and so forth. And having people who understand the ecosystem from the startup perspective, from a corporate perspective, and from an investing perspective. So this is what we wanted to bring together when we created Zacua. And it was a natural fit because I knew Mao and Juan for an extended period of time. We are co-LPs. We had made construction startup competition together, and so on and so forth. So all of us came together, and we have access to different networks. Mao in Europe, Juan in Asia, me in North America. And it was a opportune time for everything to come together, and even my skill sets from consulting, from investment banking, from construction all came together to set this firm up. So it's been a great few months since we launched it.
Yeah, I'm sure a huge amount of learning's been done. Everyone listening in, so Vivin and Tony and I last saw each other Blueprint, or it might have been Built Worlds. And Vivin had done, I think it was 2 investments. You were closing 3 more deals. And I think, did you just say you've just done them as well? You've been had a very busy, is it 6 investments you should close 2022?
6 done. We should do a 7th before the end of the year.
That's amazing, guys. Everyone listening, go check it out as well. Now, staying on you, Vivin, then Antonio, I really want to bring you in as well and hear a bit more from you. But Vivin, you mentioned obviously about your background, not only obviously in construction, consulting, obviously in investment. You've got 2 decades of sort of experience. You mentor, you advise. I don't know how you have time to do all of this. Generally, in all of you. For some of the founders sort of listening in here, you have investments globally. Are there any, obviously with your consulting hat on as well, have you got any sort of tips you can share them sort of looking to expand upon exit? I know you're involved in obviously, I think you're involved in the acquisition of Fieldwire that Hilti did, obviously the investment, then the acquisition of 300 million. I mean, that's a great story. Everyone loves a good story like that. I'm sure Javed is very happy too. For the founders here, what can you sort of share with us about how do you get to that point? Any sort of tips for them?
The most important thing is building a good company, right? Think of a problem you're passionate about, understand the product, understand the customer, understand the workflow really well, and then have the view of building a really good company. So startups need to be mindful of the exit options that they have, but shouldn't be driven by the exit itself. They shouldn't be driven by building a solution to a problem that exists. And if they build that well, if they execute well, then they will get to an exit that is a very, very good for them, right? I don't think Javed or E were looking to exit at the time they exited. It's just an opportune moment when Hilti came, the partnership made sense. And if they really wanted to go, I'm sure they could have gone and done a few other things, but this was a good opportunity. So the exit makes sense for everybody involved in that particular situation. But it's not like they built the company to get to just that stage. They built the company to be profitable. They built the company to be growing and solving pain points that existed in the market. And that's why they were so good, right? Their product was really good. And what a founder should focus on changes over a period of time. When you're very early, you're thinking about the product, you think about the customer. Product market fit is what you're striving against. You build a good product, you find which customer segment it is very well catered to, and that's what you do pre-seed, seed, almost Series A kind of stage. From Series A onwards, you start thinking about refining your go-to-market motion, right? Your focus shifts slightly from the product to the ability to monetize that and supercharge your growth, right? You start getting Series A, Series B, and so on and so forth. And once you start getting into Series B, you start thinking about unit economics. How do you make your company profitable? It's not just about revenues; it's also about having a business which is sustainable from a long-term perspective. And this is where you also spend a lot more time on scalability, having the right management levels, thinking about the culture of the organization, and the role of a CEO evolves over a period of time. And this is where you also start building relationships with potential acquirers, relationships with follow on funding, start thinking about public markets, and so on and so forth, right? That's when you have the capability to stand and uh, think through some of these longer term topics, because early on, a founder is just surviving. It's just about managing cash flow and building a product and making it successful. So this evolution is very important. And as long as they're looking to build a good company, everything else will take care of yourself. And have the right network, advisors, people on your team, investors, all of that is very important, is because that's what will help you in the long term.
Amazing. Thank you for that evolution. I was literally typing it out to sort of share with the audience after for the key insights. Now, Antonia, bringing you in, you've obviously worked across Europe, now obviously North America, and you mentioned the different roles you've worked in. Are there any sort of major challenges you've seen in the construction industry that's being faced at Hilti? I mean, you must be hearing it sort of non-stop. What can you share with the audience which say if they're looking, right, maybe this is a product we can sort of look at?
Sure. So when we think about digitalizing construction, there are several challenges, right? Including complex decision making with many stakeholders involved, project timing from design to construction, resistance to change, risk, limited standardization, and more. So to address these as you develop your solution, I recommend answering the following three questions. The first question is, what's the workflow that we are trying to address? Is there a real pain point, and is it big enough to need a new solution? I always love meeting founding teams with a deep understanding of what it is like to actually work in construction. I find that founders that spend a lot of time with customers in the field and in the office come up with the best ideas because they are observing workflows, testing solutions on the job site, and otherwise learning how their solution can best serve their customers. The second question is, who will be the main user of the product and who will be the decision maker about whether or not to purchase the solution? In other words, can you get buy-in from the field workers to use the solution you provide and from management to make it a standard for the whole company? And the third question is, how many companies do you need to bring on board to implement your solution in a project? Do you just need the trade contractor to agree to it? Or do you need the GC and the trade contractor? The decision-making process can become quite complex in some cases. And here I would like to highlight a few successful companies in this space. I would like to highlight FieldWire, given how easy it is for field teams to start using the software, and also Canvas and Dusty Robotics for the great work on engaging both users and decision makers.
Amazing. Thank you for that. I'll be sharing these 3 questions founders really need to be answering before they do their go to market. And I feel like everything you said supported what Vivin said. Antonia, outside of work, you're obviously a strong advocate for DI. I know everyone sort of talks about being advocates. What you do with Women in Contact is basically like a full-time job, but you don't obviously get paid for it. How do you sort of incorporate this into the day-to-day basis? What you sort of do? What's the sort of mission of it? Obviously, you kindly got me involved in Built World's panel, which I really enjoyed in Chicago. It's great that it's being actually put as like a topic at events rather than it being sort of taboo. Shout out to Built World's team. They're great. I'm so glad you're part of the community. But like, what does the group sort of mean to you? What are you trying to do? And what do you think is working in some businesses out there, or even in Hilti particularly?
Absolutely. The community of women in construction tech started the summer of 2021 when 5 of us met at a coffee shop in San Francisco and sat at a table for 10. So the open seats spark a question. How could we find enough women to fill the other 5 seats? That idea inspired my friend Julieta Moraday, who is a partner at Hilti Ventures, and I to create this community. So Women in Construction Tech, it's dedicated to creating opportunities and developing relationships for women driving innovation in the construction industry. We envision a construction industry where women are well networked, support each other efforts to improve and advance in the space, and otherwise thrive. So what have we done so far? We have organized in-person events at the Build World conferences in Palo Alto, Paris, and Chicago, where you, Luis, were one of the panelists, and also Vivin, you were in the audience. Thank you both for being there. And we will be continuing this partnership with Build World. You can check our brand new webpage for future dates. And very important, these events are free and open to anybody who shares our vision. We have also created local chapters in Madrid, Boston, New York, Latin America, and the Bay Area. And here, shout out to our regional leaders who are driving the Women in Construction Tech mission where they live and work. And we are also building a database of women who are looking for speaking opportunities, hiring, and much more, so that we can help make connections and increase representation and visibility for women in our industry. It's amazing to see how much demand there is for something like this in our industry. From our first event, we have had lots of interest, and Juliet and I are thrilled at how quickly we have grown this community. Clearly, there was a need.
100%. There's definitely a need. I can obviously definitely see it from the talent side, the amount of clients that say they would love, especially when they're building out their team, getting a balance. It's so important to get women into the business at early stages to attract more and retain more. And when I was on the panel, I can't remember the stats off the top of my head, but basically, I think an EY report showed that businesses with a management team, which was gender balance, they performed 35% better. And then also when they were balanced when it came down to sort of race, I think it was 45% better. So like the data doesn't lie. It shows like it works. So if you're looking for profitability as well as sort of creating equal opportunities, let's get it right. And also speak to Antonia. And of course, I'm here to advise where needed. Right. There's obviously a huge amount of high valuations going on. We're recording 2022. 2023 is going to be slightly choppier, but in the podcast I had with Greg and Matt Wegworth on the previous one, they were saying we're going to be seeing more investment going into seed and Series A, which is what we'd like to see. Vivin, obviously, and Antonia, you've been involved in Fieldwire. You've also been involved in, I guess, working with the likes of, say, Trimble. What do we expect to see in terms of, further investment, valuations and products going into 2023 and so on? Maybe Vivin, you can go first with this as your Mr. VC.
Sure. We'd actually done a survey of 80 context-focused VCs and corporate VCs just a couple of weeks back. So we have a view of a little bit of the industry, I would say, and it's positive. we do see more investment happening in this space. Pretty much 70% of the VCs we spoke to said they're going to increase their investment rather than decrease in this space, and most of them are early stage. So we do see the traction continuing to pick up in the coming months. So it had been quiet. So the way 2022 went is the Q1 was good, Q2 was quiet, Q3 was still quiet, and it started to pick up slightly, and we will see more of that happening. There is definitely a correction valuation, which we think is healthy because the valuations in 2021 were unsustainable. And there is a big difference in stages as well. A lot more activity is happening pre C to A. Series B onwards is still very quiet. It's been quiet for 2 quarters. We expect it to be quiet for a little bit longer. So there is a dichotomy between what's happening early stage and what's happening late stage. Late stage, the activity is much more muted compared to early stage. But we're seeing incredible deal flow. We've been extremely active and we will continue to stay active.
Can I ask a question? And maybe this is something I should know, but I don't. Why is Series B quiet? Is it because there was so much activity sort of before 2021 where we saw a huge amount of investment? What is there any sort of reason for this for me in the audience?
A couple of reasons. One is the IPO and the exit market is very quiet. So the SPAC market has almost disappeared. IPOs are not happening as often, and the public market valuations have corrected. This has a direct impact on later stage companies. So for them, the opportunity to exit has not happened as much, right? So that has a waterfall effect all through the cycle, and it's affecting later stage companies much more than earlier stage because earlier stage still have a long time before they have to start thinking about exit. That's the first thing that's happened. The second thing that's happened is the valuations in 2020 and 2021 were extremely high. For folks to come back and raise at that valuation, they would have had to have progress, which is significant and almost unrealistic in some cases. And down rounds are still very difficult to digest for a lot of founders, and that's not happening a lot of times. So it's about deals not happening in a lot of cases because the valuations expectations are not matching the requirements, right? So we are seeing a lot of bridge rounds, a lot of inside rounds, flat rounds where runways are being extended. And a lot of later stage companies would first prioritize their portfolio companies before making new investments. And that's leading to them also being quiet. And finally, it's about markets understanding the volatility, right? Players are still looking for the interest rates to settle, and that's taking a little bit of time. And now I think everybody has a good view of how the market could look like in the next 6, 12, 18 months. Even if it's not rosy, it's still more predictable than it was 4, 5 months back. And therefore, the deal flow should pick up slowly, and the deal making should also pick up accordingly.
That was so interesting. I'm so happy I asked that question. I think the audience listening in will also be pretty thankful. Everyone listening in as well. If you do have any further questions that you want me to keep asking, please let me know because you don't ask, you don't get, you don't learn. Thank you for that, Vivin. Antonia, what about you? What are you sort of seeing?
Very similarly to what Vivin has said, Contact is still growing strong despite the market being down overall. And when we look at the numbers, we see that 2022's deals count and capital raised, it's close to what we saw in 2021, which was a record year. But also, as Vivin said, right, valuations have softened, and there is a bigger focus in profitability versus growth at all costs. When we think about the earlier stages and later stages, we have also seen in 2022 new emerging funds targeting more the earlier stages in construction tech. And we see some of the bigger VCs and later stage VC firms, more generalists, who also start now looking into construction and having resources focused in construction. So I expect that we are going to see more investment going into the space, also considering that contact compared to many other verticals and categories, it's one that kind of arrived later to the party and it still has a lot of potential to invest in capital and generate good returns.
Absolutely. Or especially now as everyone's obviously looking to reach net zero as well. So whilst we're on that topic, how can certain construction technologies help us reach that and make our environment more sustainable. I know, Vivin, we spoke very briefly about a couple of investments like EcoWorks, which you mentioned was an easy example to give, but can you share with us any sort of technologies out there you think sort of help in sort of reducing emissions, and a bit about their sort of products as well for some of the audience who might want to look them up?
The way we think about sustainability, there are 3 or 4 areas in which these are finding traction. The first is just tracking, right? Tracking this across the life cycle. And that is in the design phase, that's in the construction phase, that's also in the operations phase. So you have companies like Carbon Title, for example, who are looking at tracking it across the life cycle. You have Mortar in London, actually, which is looking at the design phase in terms of understanding footprint of existing buildings. You have Measurable on the operations phase. So you are looking at tracking and mitigation across the value chain. So that's one area where we're seeing a lot of traction. We're also seeing traction around new materials. So you look at green concrete, you look at a new material from a glazing perspective to improve insulation qualities. And you're also looking at materials which can be broken down more easily, creating circular economy. So we're seeing that take off. We're also seeing more startups from a recycling perspective. So the one startup called Urban Machine, that's a robotics platform for recycling timber. Eric Law, who used to be the innovation head of Swinnerton, leads that. And very excited. I'm actually meeting them tomorrow. I'm always excited to talk to them. All right. But we also have retrofitting, because new construction is one problem to solve. Retrofitting is another major problem to solve. And most of the existing park of buildings is in retrofitting. And one of our investments, EcoWorks, is in that space, right? So you have to make solutions which also are not disruptive to the way things are set up. For example, what EcoWorks does is it does retrofitting of existing building to transform them to zero carbon buildings. Traditionally, the process would involve breaking down the facades. It would be an 18-month process for multifamily houses and stuff like that, because it's almost a complete reconstruction. But what EcoWorks does is they go scan buildings, identify weak points, and build a second skin around it. And all of this is finalized. And what typically used to take 18 months, they now do it in 6 to 8 weeks, which is an incredible difference in terms of timeline, right? They also do it at a lower cost. They also do it in a manner that is completely modular. So not just is it less disruptive, you can also build it off-site mostly. You can have people still living in there for most part of the process, and you have data from the building because you're scanning the building. You can track the light characteristics from a carbon footprint of the building on an ongoing basis. So this just changes the game completely. They voted the PropTech of the year in Europe actually earlier this year, and they've had phenomenal traction. So it's we're very, very happy and excited in terms of what they've done. But this is just a starting point.
Absolutely. That's amazing. Yeah, I've got to shout out to all those businesses you just mentioned. Now, Antonia, you obviously here or into modular construction. For the audience, what does that mean, and what sort of technologies are you sort of following in that space as well? I know you're passionate about sustainability, so anything you can share with us, we'd love to learn.
Prefabrication and modular construction are rapidly growing. This is one of the biggest opportunities we have to address the housing crisis and to mitigate the impact of the built environment. We have seen a lot of startups develop some mind-blowing technologies to address different aspects of prefabrication and modular construction, including processes and productization. From startups that are targeting the overall design of the building, such as Cloud Apartment and Modulus, to startups that are focusing on improving the new processes that are required to enable prefabrication, to startups that are working on taking certain parts of the building offsite. A great example here is KidSwitch, who I just visited last week at their showroom in San Francisco, and that have a strong focus on circularity. Offerings like this help to build faster and more efficiently, reduce waste, repurpose spaces, and expand the life of the buildings. Another big challenge in our industry is the labor shortage. Companies are really struggling to find talent. In the content world, I think we will see more startups working on automatizing repetitive and unsafe activities, and venture capital being more than ready to support their growth.
I think there's another business, Modulus, who does something similar. If I'm getting that right, I think we met him at the Bit World. Am I correct saying that, too? Just making sure I'm getting my facts right. Right. Well, we're now at the end of the podcast, but how we finish it, guys, is that we finish with the LMRE part. So due to time, I'm going to direct each one at you. So L is share a lesson you have learned in your career. Vivin, this one's for you.
The most important is probably that you can learn from everyone. You can learn from everyone in every setting. So, curiosity and openness is probably the two most important traits that we look for in founders because everything that you do in a business is about learning, adapting, and building better. And that's what we're doing with our firm as well. We've learned from a lot of other people and we're trying to incorporate that in the business and also paying it forward. I think that is equally important in what we do.
Thank you for that. All right, Antonia, we've already given quite a few businesses the shout out, but feel free to give anyone a product service a shout out.
So all my shout outs will go to the community of women in construction tech and the people that have helped us grow. I'm forever impressed by my co-founder, Julieta Moraday, and all our local chapter leaders. Romy and everyone in your team at LMRE, it's great to work with them. Our sponsors, Bill Walls, Rudy Wagner, head of Hilti's corporate venture team, who has been very supportive from day one, and you, Vivin, for connecting us to all the women you know in the industry.
Right. Okay. What's been the most rewarding part of working in the construction technology industry, Vivin?
The rewarding part is working with the founders. So you meet so many exceptional founders that it energizes you and people who are really passionate about the industry, passionate about solving problems. Even Antonia, the way she's passionate about women in construction, right? It just energizes you to be around people who believe in a cause, right? And that's what keeps you going. That's what makes sure that even if you're putting 16, 17, 18-hour days, you're still waking up in the morning, next day morning, and ready to go. I'm actually very excited when I wake up Monday mornings. I look forward to my days. I look forward to my meetings. And I look forward to spending time with the people I want to spend time with.
It must be a bit of a change from working, I guess, in consultancy as well. So it's great to hear you love the work you do.
Waking up at 4 a.m. and taking flights versus waking up and spending time with people you want. Yes, it's very different.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing a lot of people move from the consultancies looking to get into, I guess, more sort of like a scale up sort of tech sort of world, especially now since EY announced they won't be doing bonuses. So I think we're going to see a lot more movement coming there. Right, Antonia, please finish us off with what are you most excited about for the future of the construction technology industry?
Yes, so I'm very excited about the massive opportunity ahead of us to bring innovation and to make the industry more diverse. And I'm even more excited about the very talented and very passionate people who are working for it every day. And as Vivin said, this is a great source of energy.
Agreed. Thank you for that. Everyone listening in, I hope you can now see what I was talking about at the beginning. These Antonia and Vivin are such drivers of the community. They really know what they're talking about and they're passionate about it. So those who are looking for advice, maybe you're looking for investment, I don't know, speak to these guys and give you some direction. They're very busy, but if you have a good product and you're not just looking for a quick exit, they know, very well connected, and I'm sure be happy to have a conversation. But look, both of you, it's been a pleasure having you both join me on the Propcast, and looking forward to catching up with you both after the show.
It's always a pleasure, Ru, and thanks so much for having us. It's so much fun spending time with you and talking to you.
Thank you so much. It has been great to join you in the podcast.
Making a high-quality podcast like this one takes a lot of work. That's a fact. But not when you hire a podcast company. With our white glove experience, we handle everything for you. From guest outreach all the way through to publishing and promotion, we handle it all. You show up to hold great interviews and build relationships with your guests, and we take care of everything else. Podcasting is not just about the audience. Every podcast interview is the start of a new relationship. With a weekly podcast, you'd build relationships with 52 ideal partners or prospects through your podcast interviews over the next 12 months. Do you believe that 52 new relationships would help grow your business? We do. Contact Jason at apodcastcompany.com and let's talk.